think, 500,000 visitors looking at his selection and his photography daily. So we're a part of 500,000 that will see everything tonight through the Instagram. Benjamin, welcome.
Thank you. So, when I was a little boy, if you had asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would have said, a doctor. Not an astronaut. It took me 23 years to change my mind. And 4 years ago, something magical happened. I was sitting at my desk at work, and a colleague of mine sent me a video and said, I think you'll like this. Watch this video, check it out. That video would forever change my life. And I'm going to share a few minutes of it with you now.
Oh, golly, I remember going through launch, which is an overwhelming experience. The engines cut off. I felt myself floating out of the seat. I floated over to the window, looked out, and we were coming up over the coast of Africa. And that's when it hit me. I'm in space. I just got incredibly excited because it's something I had dreamed about since I was 6 years old.
I think you start out with this idea of what it's going to be like. And then when you do finally look at the Earth for the first time, you're overwhelmed by how much more beautiful it really is when you see it for real. It's just like it's this dynamic, alive place that you see glowing all the time.
It was truly incredible to be up there doing what I always wanted to do my whole life, and then to kind of glance back at our planet and see that view was just tremendous.
Describe what I've seen. Looking down at the Earth, and you see that line that separates day and night slowly moving across the planet. Thunderstorms on the horizon casting these long shadows as the sun sets. And then watching the Earth come alive, and you see the lights from the cities and the towns.
The events you see from space, like flying over thunderstorms, looking at them from the top, were spectacular. Like a fireworks show going on, and you're looking at it from the very top.
Shooting stars going below us, or dancing curtains of auroras. It's just very hard to describe all the the colors, the beauty, the motion.
So that was the film overview. It was 18 minutes long, and I had never seen anything like that in my entire life, right? These anecdotes, these stories from these astronauts, simply telling what they saw and telling how it changed them forever. A study released just this past year examined the testimonies of astronauts just like these men and women, and it showed how they were forever changed. They talked about developing a new appreciation for Earth's beauty, a greater sense of connection to all other living people, and a profound, overwhelming sense of emotion. You heard Ron Guerin there at the end, a man I've now met, say he was emotional and changed. What they're talking about is this idea that is commonly referred to now as the overview effect, right? They are changed by what they saw. They have received an overview of the entire planet. For a little more historical context, this picture, which you may recognize, was taken almost 50 years ago to the day, in 1968. Now, this picture is known as Earthrise, which was taken by Bill Anders, who was an astronaut on Apollo 8 as they were orbiting around the moon, looking for places to eventually land on the moon on Apollo 11, a story we all know. But in this magical moment, he looked out the window and said, "Oh my God, where is the camera?" Grabbed the camera, pressed the shutter, and took this picture. This was the first time that many people back on Earth, 1 billion people were watching this broadcast, saw the Earth in this way. Now, how does the overview effect connect with me and my story as an artist? One day, 4 years ago, I was sitting at my computer like we all do. I opened up a mapping program, Apple Maps, and as someone who had seen this movie, Overview, I was obsessed with this idea. So I thought it'd be an interesting, cool little thing to type in the word Earth into the search bar. I would press enter, it would zoom out and show the whole planet like the picture I just showed you. But something magical happened. And I pressed enter, and this is what I saw. It zoomed in. This is Earth, Texas. Earth, Texas is the only town in the entire world named Earth, but it looks like this, right? These magical circles. They look like pie charts or Pac-Man or something that I'd seen in abstract paintings before, but I didn't know what it was. I was astounded. I sent this picture, I saved it, I sent it to all my friends. I said, "What is this?" We eventually did research and found out it's a way that you irrigate crops in the Midwest of the United States. But I became obsessed with looking for these patterns and these places that told these stories of things that we had created. And I'm going to share some of the first images I found in the first day that showed me that there was an idea here that was powerful and worth sharing. So this is an airplane graveyard in Tucson, Arizona, something that I didn't even know exists, let alone to see what 4,400 military aircraft look like in the desert. Or something that looks very familiar or very mundane maybe, but when seen from above, like these shipping containers in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, come alive in this vibrant patchwork of color and composition. Or somewhere I had been before, and places we've been before many times, but we can't necessarily understand what they look like until we see them from this way. This is Paris from above, so you may recognize the Arc de Triomphe up here, or the Eiffel Tower here, or the Louvre here, but when you see it all at once like this, you have to take a step back and say, wow, I've never seen something like that. Or lastly, stories that you can only really start to understand when you see them from the overview perspective. An image like this I find very beautiful. The colors, the symmetry, the patterns. When you learn what it is, however, you have to take a step back and say, there's more going on here. This is the world's in northern Kenya, which is home to 260,000 displaced Somali refugees who are now living here. And this area, this beautiful gridded out area that I just mentioned, that is so kind of welcoming. If you live in a city, you see a city grid, is actually an extension of a camp that they're adding to over time, and those white dots are tents that are slowly going to fill up that entire space. So, I became obsessed with capturing these images, and I had more and more and more of them. And I needed to do something with it, right? I was thinking I wanted to create. I had never really done anything like this before, and my first instinct was to give the project a name. So, based on the video that I just showed you, this idea of the overview effect was very much on my mind. So, daily overview was a natural fit, right? And from there, it set me off on this adventure to post one of these new pictures every day. I had this idea that they would be places of human impact, and I would start there and just see where it went. At the time, I was working in another job, but this would be my passion and my hobby, and wherever it went, it would go. So, naturally, as a millennial, someone young like myself, I thought it made sense to share them on social media, right? I didn't know where it would take off. Instagram was just really starting. Facebook was well known and popular. Tumblr, Twitter, all of the other ones. And I didn't necessarily know, as I said, what would make the most sense, but just started sharing them across all of the platforms. It ended up that Instagram and Facebook are the most popular, I think just because they are very visual platforms. And to date, now there are 625,000 people who receive the daily dose of perspective. For me, it's not about the number that matters a lot. It's about the fact that the images that you just saw and the ones you'll see in a few minutes don't contain any people in them that you can see. You can't pick out any individual person, right? And social media in this day and age is often about the selfie and me and my friends and me and my family. So the fact that this is something that is about the collective, it's about all of us, it's tapping into that idea of the overview effect, that we are all a part of it, means a lot to me. And I think as the project grows and grows, I think that is fundamental to everything that is happening. So you're probably asking, how do I make these things now? When I first started posting them, I needed to make sure I wasn't going to get sued or arrested by the government for posting something that was inappropriate or kind of should be blurred out. So I found out in the information page of Apple Maps, the first program that I discovered that image, it said satellite imagery, copyright, Digital Globe. Digital Globe is a company based in Colorado in the United States that operates a constellation of 5 satellites. Each one is roughly the size of a truck that is constantly circling the Earth in geosynchronous orbit, which means it's traveling at 17,500 miles an hour or 28,000 kilometers an hour and constantly taking pictures of the Earth. Their images are built with these cameras that have a focal length which is nearly 300 times greater than a standard DSLR camera, which means you could take a picture from 450 miles away of a soccer ball or a football very clearly. So it is incredibly powerful technology. And what this enables me to do is to create images like the ones I just showed you. On the left, you see a standard image of Google Earth, which is reduced the resolution of your screen size on your computer or on your phone. What you would see on Daily Overview on the website or in my book or anywhere where we do prints is me taking the time to bring together all of the data that's possibly there. Right? There's a lot more in the image. And what this looks like, here's an example of one image that I would make of potash ponds in Utah. I can explain what that is in a second, but I'm able to request a certain amount of area of the land, and then it downloads, and I then have to piece together all of the various components of the image, right? So it is made up of many, many, many different images that I have to go in and find the scene lines and correct. And then what's truly fascinating about looking at the world from this perspective is that there's no top or bottom or left or right or correct way to show an image. Right? There is an infinite number of possibilities. You can expand in any direction, you can rotate it in any direction, and it's still accurate. So that's when the artistic side of things happens, when you have to decide what is the most beautiful way to show this, what is the most alluring way to get someone to stop and say, what is that? Where is that? Why are the colors that way? So every image, every day was a challenge for me to create something beautiful that would be an opportunity to educate people about what we're doing to the world. Now, I had a fantastic conversation with Gal on the phone before I came to Tel Aviv, and he said, these remind me of some abstract paintings. They're so abstract. And if you had met me at the time when I started Daily Overview, I was living in New York City, and almost every single weekend, whenever I had a free moment, I would go to MoMA or the Guggenheim or to all of the fantastic galleries in New York City and just immerse myself in abstract art. And that is what I love, that is what I studied at Yale in art history, and I think, and I definitely, when you see the following slides, I was just trying to channel and tap into the beauty and the composition of my favorite abstract expressionist painters. So this is another thing too, I've never actually showed these in public before, but I was also painting and trying to actually recreate some of their feelings and these balances and the compositions. So those are my paintings, those are not valuable at all. But when you look at an image like this on the left of a cattle feedlot, which is where they raise cows to be slaughtered on the left, perhaps it might remind you of a Mondrian painting in the grids. Or Ipanema Beach in Brazil, which is one of my favorite images. Subconsciously or perhaps purposely, it might look like one of Barnett Newman's strip paintings. Or this one of deforestation in Bolivia, which we'll be showing on Thursday. Consciously or perhaps subconsciously, it might look like an Ellsworth Kelly color blocking composition. This one of Lake Mead in the USA, which is this natural terrain, rough, craggy. The painter Clifford Still was trying to create the rough, craggy landscape of the American Midwest. If he had seen this, I'm not sure what he would have thought, but that is it in 2 dimensions. And lastly, the cover of my book. This one is very conscious, but I studied the compositions of Mark Rothko for 3 weeks to try to figure out what that felt like and how they came together. But these are all real places, right? These are all real places on the world, and when you get that feeling of abstract, you're immediately engaged. And then I think there's a deeper level to the work when you realize these are actually things that we are creating as human beings, and you can connect with that work on a deeper level. So, another thing that I've been working on for the past year, and this has gone to many different places, including the book as well, is something that I call juxtapose. If you have one of these images, you're able to show a moment in time. Right? If you have 2 images, however, you're able to tell a story about changes in time. So here are a few examples. Every year in the Netherlands, the tulip fields bloom in April. So if you're able to look at an image like this one, captured in March, and you compare it to another image captured a few weeks later, you're able to watch the flowers bloom in that magnificent cascade of color. And we'll let it go one more time, because I really enjoy it. We'll let it go one more time. Two years ago, in southeastern Brazil, a mining company had 2 dams that contained all of the waste for the mines. However, one day these dams collapsed, and all of the wastewater, roughly 62 million cubic meters of waste, was released and destroyed numerous villages in its flood, including Bento Rodrigues, seen here before the flood, and after the flood. So this story shows one of destruction in which 19 people were killed, hundreds of thousands of species were destroyed in the release of the waste, and millions of people did not have access to clean drinking water for almost a year after this happened. And yet it's still beautiful, right? It's a struggle to enjoy but also know what is going on. So this patch of desert seen here is in Mafraq, Jordan. This satellite image was captured in 2011, the same year that the crisis in Syria started. So when you compare this image to one captured just this year in 2017, you're able to see the construction of the Zatari refugee camp, which is the largest refugee camp that has been built as a result of that crisis. It is estimated that 83,000 people currently live in this vast sea of tents in Jordan. So, I have been on this adventure for 3.5 years. Someone who was not classically trained as an artist, but now considers myself one, and now considers myself to be a creator. And I think the most important lesson that I've learned through doing all of this is that I do not have all the answers, right? The answers in where I should go next and what I should be doing can come from elsewhere. So to have this openness to new ideas, to be receptive and listen and not think you have all the answers has been crucial. So I want to tell a few stories about what has happened there. One day I was contacted by 2 math teachers in the United States who said, we've been showing our images to our students and we're teaching them geometry lessons through the images because they're flat and 2-dimensional. And they love them. Can you send us more images so that we can make lesson plans out of this and make a website out of it? And Daily Overview Math was born. And every week they are now creating math lessons for their students. My background was not in math. I was not thinking education, but that whole world opened, and now I'm pursuing a second book where it will be for children or teenagers to learn through these images. Or to follow up on the amazing lecture we just had about printing and clothing, someone contacted me as a student who was doing her thesis project in fashion and said, can I make textiles out of your images? And she did just that. And now I'm pursuing collaborations with major athleisure companies to create clothing out of the products. To do so in a sustainable way, but to do so and bring the images in the world in something that's wearable. I've been lucky enough to have exhibitions all over to showcase the images not on the small cell phone screen, but as big as possible. So at the largest museum in Germany in Munich, or the airport in San Francisco, New York, Paris, Los Angeles, and have 2 exhibitions coming up this summer in Sweden and Barcelona, as well as one here in Tel Aviv on Thursday that you should all come to. It's been an incredible opportunity, as I just said, to show these images in their truest, fullest sense, right? To be fully immersed in the size of it, like you can see on this big screen. It means so much more to me to have them shown to the world that way. Also, again, to me not having the right idea, when I started this project, I thought it would be an environmental story about what we're doing to the planet, and I limited myself in that way to thinking that's where it would go. But soon enough, people started contacting me about doing commissioned photo essays to speak about what's going on in the Arctic right now, and being able to use the satellites to access that imagery, which you can't typically do with a helicopter and travel, or to focus entirely on mining, or to be contacted by Lufthansa to do entirely focused on travel and travel destinations. These are all ideas that I did not come up with myself, but make perfect sense for where the project can go. And I can't wait to see where else it will go in the future based on what other people bring to me. And then one day I got a phone call from the gentleman who's now my editor at Penguin Random House, and he said, have you ever thought about doing a book? And I said, let's do it. And I made this thing. I had never done anything like this in my entire life. The amount of work that went into making a cohesive piece of literature out of a collection of images was an incredible challenge, but one that I went into and embraced fully. And it was an opportunity for me to bring the project together in a cohesive idea and explain what was I hoping to show and tell. So each of the chapters of the book is a different theme of human impact. What are we doing to the world? Not necessarily saying it's good or bad, everything in between, right? What are we doing and what does that look like? And how can we understand ourselves better through this perspective? So I'm going to go through each of the chapters right now with one image from each. So where we harvest is all about food and where we get our food from. So these are rice paddies in China and terraced on the hillsides. Where we extract is all about mining. This is an iron ore mine in Australia. So steel is generated, 98% of the world's steel is generated from mined iron ore. Power is all about energy. This is a solar concentrator in Seville, Spain. Where we live. We all live places, we all have homes, we all build houses and communities. This looks like another planet, but it's actually Boca Raton, Florida. Various residential communities with their own unique structure, built on top of waterways in the latter half of the 20th century. Where we move, we're all moving around, we're going places. It's this incredible human ability and yearning to see the world, which is natural. But in the process, we create these pathways and structures, and we move cargo even. So these are some of the world's largest ships waiting outside the entry to the port of Singapore. Some of them weighing up to 300,000 tons, and moving 1/5 of the world's shipping containers every year. Where we design, which I think is a very appropriate chapter for this conference here today. So thinking about where our vision and our ideas take place on a grand scale. So these are some of my favorite images and I included two here today because this is a design audience. The first is of Spiral Jetty, which is a land art installation on Great Salt Lake in the United States. You can see the spiral here down in the corner. This is a Robert Smithson piece. And I can't help but think when I see this that he would have loved to see it like this, in its purest, truest, two-dimensional form. So urban planning, as I mentioned, is particularly powerful from this perspective when you start to think how someone's vision and idea comes to be on a grand scale. So this is Serta's plan for Barcelona. You can see the strict grid pattern and how all of the apartment buildings have these communal courtyards, which creates this kind of Lego-like kind of patchwork pattern across the landscape, as well as the intersections, which are octagons. So it increases the amount of sunlight and ventilation and parking at street level. This is the Eixample district in Barcelona. Where we play, as humans, we have this yearning also to enjoy ourselves and have fun. So what does that look like, and how do we create for that play? This is where I'm from in New York City. This is Central Park. And it gives you an interesting idea of what 7% of the island of Manhattan being dedicated to green space looks like. Where we waste. So this chapter comes at the end of the book because all of the processes that you've seen so far often result in waste. So when we move around, like the airplane graveyard you saw before, those planes go somewhere. Or when we live in cities, that trash has to go somewhere. Or when we mine, that waste has to go somewhere. But at the same time, that waste can be beautiful. This is waste from an iron ore mine in Michigan in the United States, which looks like an oil painting or something, again, more abstract. But at the same time, you think that pink color can't be good to swim in, or it can't be very nice. It's very chemical-induced water, but yet it's beautiful at the same time. And the last chapter of the book is something new that I started working on in that project, which I call Where We Are Not. So even though humans are sprawling all around the world, there are still places that are left untouched. And as the overview effect speaks to this idea of appreciating the earth that we have, the only one we have, right? The one that we need to cherish and protect. So looking at these places as well. And this is a glacier in Patagonia, in Argentina, the Perito Moreno Glacier, which is one of the largest in the world. So, as you've been looking at these images, I hope in some way you started to think beyond this theater, or think beyond Tel Aviv, or think beyond Israel, and think about the larger world. I try to meditate on that idea every single day. Think about where I am, but everything else that is going on at all times. And just to conclude, I want to speak to this idea of the power of perspective and relate it back to my experience of doing this for nearly 4 years, every single day. It is essential, I think, on any project you're working on, any creative project, to stop and say, am I thinking as big as possible, right? Am I stuck in the details, or am I needing to think beyond how this project fits into my firm and in my life, and is it something about the city, is it something about the world at large that I need to think of? And I think if you can adapt that perspective, it will change your work and make it more meaningful and more sustainable, really, in the long term. Come on. Through all of this, through all of the ups and downs, through starting this and through all of the different manifestations of the project, I think it is essential to find the story you want to tell, but again, be open to telling it in new ways and understand that you don't have all the answers and you don't know where it's going to go, right? To have that flexibility. Because I think if we're all stuck, again, thinking small, thinking on this one path, we may miss all these other incredible opportunities that may come our way. I have been lucky to turn a passion project and a hobby into a career. And the thing I often tell people if they're looking to do something like that is to think of the times or the activities or the moments where you lose track of time, right? Where time disappears and you are just fully in something. And for me, this is what this was. I became obsessed with creating these images, and I couldn't stop doing it, and I knew that is something I could pursue. And the fact that I've been able to do it every single day for 4 years, I think proves that for me. So I hope everyone in their life and in their work and in their creativity finds something similar to that. As someone who would call himself an unlikely creator, who is honored and humbled to be speaking at a design conference, I think my story shares that we all have unknown creative potential, right? Gal mentioned this in the introduction. I think if you are willing and open to be a creator, you have absolutely no idea where that can go. And if you don't even know what you would work on, the ideas of being creative in the world of art and design are not limited. There are new things like satellite photography that didn't exist before, but you can make up your own medium of art, right? We are all creators at the end of the day, and I truly believe that. And last but not least, I think it is absolutely essential to believe in the power and the relevance of your ideas. So I had this idea that the overview effect had the potential to change, it wasn't my idea, but I learned about this idea that the overview effect had the potential to change the way that we as human beings see the world. That's a very lofty, powerful idea that you might say, this isn't worth your time. You can't actually change the way that people see the world. It's a big world. But I firmly believed in it. I believed everything those astronauts said. And the fact that I've been able to meet them now and talk to them about it, I believe it even more. I think this project is working to solve and potentially create another solution for understanding the climate crisis and what we're doing to the planet, and presenting a new and beautiful way of understanding what we're doing to the planet. Right? I don't think that existed in many ways before I started this. Right? If you think about climate change, you see a picture of icebergs melting or heat rising off the pavement saying it's a hot day. I stumbled upon something that presents something enjoyable and something that challenges you to have an internal dialogue and a contemplation about what is happening right now. It's challenging you to embrace the truth of what is going on the planet, right? That's an idea that I could not give up on. And I think if we can all find something like that, all find something that works towards this common goal, this common universal consciousness, this understanding of what it means to be a species that can coexist and create a sustainable future, I think we will create a better and smarter and safer future for our planet. So thank you all so much.
We're moving to